Namaste and welcome to Theopolitica Talks. Today we're discussing a really interesting and probably quite provocative paper called Karma, Sovereignty and the Quest for Identity and Homeland. Across the world, societies are grappling with a fundamental question: who belongs and on what basis? For decades, the dominant model has been universal rights and resources. But what happens when that model comes under strain? Here in England, some are now saying multiculturalism has failed. Diversity is not a strength. This new discussion paper proposes an approach rooted not just in citizenship, but in three deeper ideas: indigeneity, sovereignty, and stakeholder contribution. It's a framework that challenges conventional thinking and raises difficult but important questions about fairness, identity, and the future of the nation-state. To discuss this, I'm joined by the author of this report, Pandit Satish K. Sharma. Welcome, Panditji.
Thank you, Navita. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about this issue, which I think is one, very critical, very contemporary, but is an issue which is going to grow and grow and grow unless we sit together and deal with it. So let's start the ball rolling. You refer to it as a discussion document, and that's my hope, that it will stimulate discussion. I try and create a framework where people can explore some ideas. By no means is it complete. By no means does it present a solution, but I think it'll help us get a long way towards those.
Okay, so your paper raises some very big questions about identity. Who belongs to a nation? Who contributes to it? And how societies should think about fairness when it comes to access to the country's resources. Let's start with at the beginning. What led you to think about these concepts? And I guess, what was the question you were trying to solve?
The time that we find ourselves in, the place that we find ourselves in, I think are worth mentioning. We're approaching the end of the period of colonization and colonialism. We're seeing the stories that were told by colonizers to their own populations, but also to the populations they colonized, slowly beginning to fray. Questions are being asked, and everybody is revisiting the whole notion of who are we, where do we belong, what's our real narrative, where have we come from, and who is in our kinship group. This is happening all over the world. It's quite funny that Great Britain is the nation which completely rode a coach and horses through the ideas of indigeneity, of some sort of sovereign loyalty, some sort of, if I can use Churchill's words, he said, I do not accept that if a dog has lain in a manger for the longest period of time, that it has a right to that manger. And then he continued in saying that, and I don't really have a problem with the idea of an indigenous race being replaced by a more worldly wise race. Okay? And so for this conversation to be happening here and now, you have to accept the possibility that divinity has got a sense of irony and a sense of humor. What stimulated the conversation and the thought? You mentioned that we're hearing phrases such as multiculturalism is dead, that diversity is not a strength but a weakness, and even more extreme phrases such as England for the English. There is a conversation which is happening. It's not happening in a reasoned, tranquil, stable manner. It's happening in response to a number of developments, and I think fear, I think the threat of erasure, ethnocide, all of those things are beginning to appear in the mind of the people who have lived in this land for a long period of time. And rather than letting it continue so that it can be sorted out on the streets or in brutal language, I thought it was worth me reflecting, perhaps using a dharmic lens, and trying to come to a vocabulary set, a set of ideas, which might at least provide a framework for a dialogue to start. And that's where I'd like to start the whole process.
Okay. So I guess just for clarity, I think what you're saying is that you're trying to make a moral, a dharmic argument, which may eventually lead to some policy proposals, but we're not quite there yet. So really, it's a framework for discussion to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, something is happening, and it's not pleasant. It's not friendly, and there's almost a visceral fear beginning to find its way into the language which is being used by the people who have been in this island for a long period of time. And that never bodes well. So I thought it's worth taking some of the heat out of it, or trying to, and let's see whether we can develop the words and ideas to move this forward. No doubt at some point in time there's going to be an action. People will act. Before they act, they need to get their thoughts clear, and words help us to clarify our thinking. So I've hopefully contributed a gathering of words, a web of ideas, and a vocabulary set, which will help people to start to understand what it is they're feeling, why they're feeling it, and to be able to articulate it so that it's accommodated.
So it's a kind of a proactive approach to get on the front foot of something that you see as inevitably developing, given the signs you're seeing in the society at the moment.
Yes, I've been in this country for over 60 years now, and we saw and lived through some very difficult times, 4 generations in this country. And then we had a period, probably from about the 90s through until probably 4 or 5 years ago, where there was relative tranquility, a sense of community and harmony. But the last 2 or 3 years have seen that virtually disappear altogether. So there is something happening. It's happening already. There are fissures which are already appearing. And the people of this island, these islands, the English, they're actually long-suffering folk. They're very patient. I think Will Durant described them as salt of the earth, and long to anger. It takes a long time for them to get to the stage where they say, right, enough is enough. And I can see us approaching that stage, if we're not already there, very, very quickly.
Okay, fair enough. Now, having taken a look at your paper, one thing that's stood out to me was that it seems to be moving the dialogue away from a kind of universal model of entitlement. And instead it says that access to public resources should be determined by 3 criteria, which it proposes to be indigeneity, sovereignty, and stakeholder status. So can you explain this framework, and why did you choose those particular criteria?
Those are words which I think are probably most indicative of the beginning of the journey. They come closest to what I was trying to capture, but they're not perfect. So it's work in progress. There is a sense that there are people who belong to these islands more than others, and that's being articulated. There is a sense that this nation has values, it's got cultural norms, it's got lessons that have been learned by multiple generations, and that they're very valuable to the people who have been on these islands the longest, and that they're endangered. And the third thing that struck me was that there is a sense that access to public resources, the nation's treasury, access to land, access to justice, all of those things, there seems to be a problem in access to those. And I wanted to try and understand what's the problem, who has access to the public resources, and who is feeling that they're deprived of access. And so those 3, broadly speaking, I've put them under the headings of indigeneity, i.e. who belongs to this land more than others. That's the first prioritization attempt. The second is the notion of what I call sovereign loyalty. When you have got an investment in a nation, your ancestors may have fought for its security. You may have had many generations farming the land, creating and producing food to feed the people of these lands. You may have taken an oath of loyalty to the nation. So those are all aspects of sovereign loyalty. And again, I think that they're an asset, and probably, although not precisely, a quantifiable asset, certainly a qualitatively measurable asset. And then the last thing is stakeholders. There are people who adhere to, respect and honour the first two, and they pose no threat to the first two. In fact, they find themselves resonating with those two, and so are very keen to work, to invest, to pay taxes, to serve in the public sphere, etc., to become significant stakeholders. I may have missed some other key factors, but those are the three which I think can be used to navigate this journey now. Who belongs here? Why do they belong here? What are the values and societal discoveries that are intrinsic to this land? And who's a part of the journey?
Let's delve into indigeneity a bit more, because that's probably, some would say, quite a politically charged concept. You've defined it in the report as people who have a deep historical and cultural connection to the land. And you argue that those with the deepest historical connections should have priority. Why is this so important that it should influence policy decisions?
So thank you for jumping in with potentially the most contentious part of this. Let's get that out of the way. So let's go back to the very basics. A free person is one who is entitled to the fruits of their hard work and their labour. If somebody else is entitled to the fruits of your hard work and your labour, then you're a slave. If you can't change your circumstances, then you're a slave. And so at the very foundation of the way in which I've looked at this, there are people who have been investing in this country, who have been toiling in this country, and who have been sacrificing the fruits of their labour to invest in a wider society. And they have been doing this longer than anybody else. Then I would describe them as being indigenous. Now, it's funny because this word has already been mentioned, and there has been a conflict in saying, well, are the Saxons more indigenous than the Normans? Which is an intellectual expedition, but practically speaking and being pragmatic, it serves no purpose to the discussion today. What I think is relevant is what I call relative indigeneity. And so starting from the point of wanting not to start with the inclusive approach, I thought, well, let's explore it from an exclusive approach. Who is the least indigenous? And that's easily identifiable. If somebody's arrived in this country on a boat 2 days ago and they hail their indigeneity as a different nation, they belong to a different race, a different culture, then they are the least of indigenous people in this country. And so they and their ancestors have sacrificed the least, have invested the least. And so I'm proposing that it's a just understanding that in fact their access to public resources and rights and hotels is actually significantly less than somebody who has a longer indigeneity index, shall we say, a larger indigeneity index than they have. So starting from that point of view, you can actually work backwards. Another thing which I think is important is that the conversation itself should be undertaken by those who have the highest indigeneity index. So somebody who is from, they trace their roots to Anglo-Saxons. They've got a good old-fashioned English surname and have grown up seeing multiple generations, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, all in this same societal framework. They have a right to have a conversation about the manner in which their society and their accumulated social capital should be dispersed. And that right to be a participant in that conversation, I'm proposing as a greater right than the right of somebody who has just literally arrived here a couple of weeks ago. I don't think that's unjust, and I don't think it's unfair. And so working the indigeneity conundrum from that angle actually takes us to a place which is productive. We can then start to see how a matrix or an index could be created. And my suggestion is that one of the resources that a person has a right to is the right to engage in a conversation about indigeneity. Somebody who has no indigenous, who has 0 on the indigenous index, shall we say, hypothetically speaking, I don't think really has a right to demand that their views be accommodated, as when compared to somebody who has ancient family ties, contribution and participation in this country.
I mean, I guess you could see there could be some discussion around how far back one would go. And I think it's really interesting that, and very helpful comment that you made is, let's look at it backwards. So rather than start from thousands of years ago, let's start from today and then work our way back and look at the length of time, contributions that various groups of people have made to the land, and use that as a...
Yeah, I heard somebody make a suggestion. Well, does your name have to appear in the Doomsday Book for you to be considered indigenous? Which, as I said, is a flippant and intellectual sort of expedition. But if we start to approach this from the point of view of why is this a problem at this point in time? Look at recent history, what has changed, and what has changed for the better and what has changed for the worse, then I think we start a more productive engagement with the issues at hand. So yes, let's start with the least indigenous and work our way backwards. I think what we'll find is that once we have managed to draw clear blue water between the least indigenous, and then we have got a graded process as to the most indigenous, right? Then the earlier historical groups become of no relevance to this conversation. You know, in that scenario, I'm not indigenous, right? There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that my indigeneity is not from the soil of this land. And you know, I can't help but chuckle when people were saying, well, Rishi Sunak's English. And I'm saying, he's not, right? He is not indigenous to these islands. And I think there's nothing wrong in acknowledging and accepting that. It doesn't diminish the fact that we are stakeholders, that we are investing in the well-being of this country and its indigenous people as well as ourselves. And that's a statement of reality.
Yeah, it's a statement of fact, almost, isn't it? And
it is.
You don't achieve anything by hiding or whitewashing the facts. So let's tackle them up front. You mentioned, so this index of indigeneity, I suppose, it does seem like quite a bold concept. I mean, one wonders could it lead to more social divisions, or, if you like, tiers of belonging in a society? And I guess that would be quite a controversial subject, wouldn't it? I mean, how would you stop? I see the logic of where you're going, but how would we stop the sort of negative side effects of separating people on that basis?
It's a wonderful perspective. And it occurs to me that we are already on a journey of conflict. We are already on a journey of division. And that there are people in this society who, I would say, are indigenous, but who are deprived of the benefits that their ancestors would hope would accrue to them through their sacrifices. The English people who died on the beaches at Normandy, right, did so because they were hoping it was going to benefit their children, their descendants. And yet the white young man, academically speaking, is struggling to perform at the same levels as some of the smaller minority groups. And so there's a conflict already there. There is a conflict which says we have a need and we have a right, and yet our need is not being satisfied. Our capacity to function and feel fulfilled and make a contribution to this society is not being satisfied, and there is something wrong. So we're already at that point where the journey, if we continue in this direction, is towards conflict, and ever greater conflict. And unless something is done to address this, civil war is not an impossibility. You know, it seems really odd to be speaking about civil war in the England of the 21st century. But these things happen, and they happen very quickly. They develop over a long period of time, but they escalate and happen very quickly. So I don't think we have a choice except to engage with this issue, irrespective of whether it will lead to contentious positions, it will lead to conflict, or it will lead to senses of isolation amongst some groups and not others. Where it will lead is where it will lead. We're heading in that direction already. What I'm trying to do is to help diminish, one, the erratic approach to that conclusion, but also to make it as least traumatic as it possibly can be. And somewhere on that journey, I think we should be able to be, we should be able to contribute words, vocabulary, understanding, so that all sides in this conversation can recognize the position of the other sides as well. In that, I think we have a degree of hope.
Right. You mentioned the young white men who fought at the battlefronts during the World Wars. If I were to throw a spanner in the works on that and see what your answer would be to where would you put the 2 million Indians who fought for Britain in the World Wars as well? I mean, they made a tremendous sacrifice as well. How would they score on the indigeneity scale?
So, a great example to start with. Firstly, they weren't indigenous. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But were they displaying sovereign loyalty? I think they were. Were they displaying stakeholder status? I think they were. But there is another dimension in that example. They were indigenous to a land which was enslaved by the British. They were indigenous to a land where their freedoms were denied to them, even though they were indigenous. They were enslaved by a land which completely ignored stakeholder status. Yeah? The British Empire openly said everything under our dominion is our resource. Bodies, land, plants, livestock, minerals, etc. And so they were also trying to be loyal and to recover their stakeholder status in their own homeland. So I think it fits into the model quite well. In fact, as I was writing this, it came to me that this is a template and a matrix, an index, shall we say, which could be applied to India even at this point in time. There is an increasing conversation which is running along similar lines, where people are saying, well, this is a homeland for the indigenous Hindus. And they're struggling again to articulate it. But it's a reflection of the same realignment. It's natural for people to gather together, to commune, to share learned experiences and to develop their societies. And to do so with a vision which is unique to them. You know, the ultimate diversity is where indigeneity is completely respected and protected. So we have, every nation is on its own civilizational trajectory. And it's different. It has its own body of literature, its own body of cultural experience and history. And each of those is a treasure trove of human understanding. And I think that's worthy of being protected and diversity being maintained. If the consequence is that this notion of universal rights and universal citizenship and so on and so forth is the casualty, I think that's a price worth paying.
Interesting. I love the way how the framework seems to be so versatile and translatable from continent to continent. I mean, I'm sure, and might get into it later, how it applies to the Americas. I mean, we've talked a little bit about England and we've touched upon India, but obviously Americas is a huge area where this probably would throw a lot of light on how things could develop going forward. Let's just delve into the second pillar of your framework, sovereignty. Now that's interesting because it brings in the idea of rewarding those who have defended the nation's survival. It's to do with valuing the sacrifices that they've made and their contributions. But does that mean that those who have not defended a nation or whose families have not had an opportunity to do it, they wouldn't have as strong a claim on the nation's resources? Or how would you situate that?
Uncomfortable though it may initially sound, I think you summarized it really well. So I use the phrase sovereign loyalty. And I talked about the fruits of one's labors accumulated over generations, and some of the fruits being sacrificed for the well-being of the nation. Some of those fruits are even the lives of the people of that nation. So the simple example is, let's say you have 2 or 3 generations of a family which has been engaged in the military, in armed services, and has had people who have sacrificed their very existence to protect the ideas of that nation and the heritage of the people of that nation. There is no doubt that there is an element of sovereign loyalty. There is a nation, it's sovereign, it has boundaries, it has culture, it has heritage, and it has a people who've been on that nation for a long period of time, and people have defended them. So that's crystal clear. If I can demonstrate the lesser grade of sovereign loyalty, shall we say, with an example. If you have citizenship in a nation, but your sovereign loyalty is to some other nation or some other ideology, who do you bow your head in front of? Right? Who are you willing to sacrifice your well-being for? That is a different grade of sovereign loyalty. And so I think that a distinction between the two is perfectly valid. And in terms of access to public resources, those who have a higher grade in the sovereign loyalty index, you can see I'm making the language up as we develop the idea, then they would have greater entitlement to the benefits of being part of this nation. Who do you bend your knee in front of? Who do you bow your head in front of?
Right.
If it's within the nation where you are and you're serving that nation, then I'm suggesting that you're, as an individual, you're higher up on the sovereign loyalty index.
And does this extend, so you mentioned several generations of people who've been contributing to the defense of the nation. How far back would you go and how would you measure it? And I guess the final point is that is there not a danger that you're creating a kind of inherited privilege rather than an individual's current merit-based privilege?
Oh, a loaded area this one is. But let me be as straightforward as I can. The notion of inherited privilege has become something negative. But in my own life, I have sacrificed earnings and income to give my children a better start in life, so that they do not face poverty. Right? They're not starting in life at the point where their father came to this country with £3.50 and sort of and nothing else and built everything from that point. It's perfectly natural to accumulate assets, wealth, and influence, and then pass that on to those who are a part of your kinship group. And a family is the smallest kinship group to which almost all of us are loyal. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The problem arises when what's being passed on has been accumulated at the expense of the human rights of other people.
Right.
So inherited privilege in and of itself isn't problematical at all. It's perfectly natural. It's only when it's denying somebody else's opportunities, rights, and freedoms that it becomes problematical. And so in the scenario that we're talking about, where you have a group of people who are in a nation, they have been loyal to that nation, and as a consequence have been able to acquire status, influence, power, and authority, remember, without inflicting human rights abuses on other people.
I guess that's quite key.
That is fundamental to it.
Yeah.
And that's the limit, I think, of the sovereign loyalty test that I would apply. A person who has just landed has thrown away their passport and is demanding authority, influence, power, and resources, has demonstrated no sovereign loyalty whatsoever. And it's an extreme example. So on that element of the index, I don't think that they would rank particularly highly. It's an extension of this thought would be that if you have a veteran who is homeless on the streets of London, right, he has, to my mind, demonstrated sovereign loyalty to a greater degree and should qualify for support from the state before the first example of somebody who has just arrived.
Right.
There's clearly an injustice that's going on there.
Yes.
And that injustice is now beginning to find its expression in a manner which is passionate and emotional, but also on occasion hostile. And so I'm hoping that if we get a bit of clarity, we can work out how to deal with these injustices.
Right. I guess what you're trying to do is to create this framework and give the words the adequate language for people to be able to express what they're feeling and work out a solution.
Absolutely.
Rather than a bottled up feelings which then spill over into unintended consequences.
And conflict.
Right.
Yeah, precisely. That's what I'm hoping it will contribute.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see when it gets out into the public sphere what the responses will be. And I'm sure we're going to get the complete range of responses, good, appreciative, and also all sorts of ad hominems.
Yes.
But it's a conversation that needs to happen.
Right.
So I'm proposing that an indigeneity index of some description, doesn't need to be called that, it sounds very statistical and lacking in compassion, a sovereign loyalty index, for want of a better phrase. Both of those would help.
Okay, and then I guess the final one, which is stakeholder status, your third pillar, which makes a lot of sense, actually. To me, it does. It's about contribution, taxes that people have paid, work, community involvement. I guess it also helps to make the framework a bit more measurable, so you can quantify it a bit more. One question that arises would be then, would someone who isn't Indigenous still be able to move along that spectrum through the sovereign loyalty index or the stakeholder status index?
I think so. By no means is this the perfect solution to the conundrum within which we're trapped, but it's en route to it. And justice, as well as the right to the fruits of one's labours, is actually at the heart of this.
Right.
And so if somebody, well, I'll use myself as an example, the family's been here 4 generations, and we've had 4 generations of investment, of engaging in economic activity, of working in the public services areas, creating wealth, teaching, all of those sorts of things. So we are stakeholders here. And as stakeholders, we've demonstrated that we have some degree of loyalty to this nation. Okay? There are many people from our community who have participated in military activities, served in the armies and so on and so forth. They too are demonstrating both stakeholder status, but also what I call sovereign loyalty. I would say that in my mind, and this is not yet decided, sovereign loyalty also would encompass becoming a public servant, because you are then contributing to the well-being of the state. But the last thing about stakeholder status is, if you look at the inclusive and exclusive aspect of it, you can also use that to identify who doesn't have stakeholder status. Okay? And so somebody who hasn't contributed, somebody who has no history of either public service or payment of taxes or whatever, that person does not rank so highly in terms of stakeholder status. I know what you're going to ask, so I'm going to hypothetically just jump in case it is.
Okay.
It's perfectly possible, I think, for a person to have a high stakeholder status without being Indigenous and without being particularly high on the sovereignty index,
Right.
and claim to have a right to access the resources of the country if their stakeholder status supports that. So I'm
Right.
not saying that the sovereignty loyalty index is higher
Right.
than stakeholder status,
Okay.
or that the indigeneity test is the gold standard and then sovereignty is a silver standard and stakeholder is a bronze standard. That is, I think that has to evolve yet.
Right.
But in my mind, all three of those, they're like the legs of a three-legged stool. And when all three are present,
Yeah.
then I think the right to expect participation and access to resources in the state is the highest.
Right. So the three pillars should somehow be combined in order to help decide on the prioritization of access to public funds. And this would be things like healthcare, education, welfare benefits, government jobs.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
there's a principle in this country that the taxpayer's pound is neutral. It doesn't belong, it's purely secular, it's non-sectarian, right? It is
Right.
blind to identity, and it should be on the basis of being a citizen of this country.
Right.
But that's not the case.
Right. You're refining it and making it more accurate and more targeted.
Correct.
I guess, in a
That's
way.
what I'm wanting to do without falling foul of things like the Equalities Act
Okay.
and so on, right? The criteria I've chosen are actually outside of those criterion as established by the Equalities Act, except possibly indigeneity. But the Equalities Act has deep, deep flaws, and maybe this can be part of its evolutionary process.
Right. Now, this argument, it makes a lot of sense, but it does seem to challenge the liberal universalist ideas of equality, at least the surface level of ideas that liberals often like to preach about, and whether their policies achieve that, that's a whole different discussion. But how would you balance fairness to citizens with humanitarian obligations, like, for example, honest refugees who are quite destitute?
The image that springs to my mind is that as a society, not necessarily as a state, as a society, poverty is increasing in this country. The English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, Northern Irish, they are not enjoying untold periods of prosperity. There is an element now creeping in that austerity is back. We have to tighten our belts, etc., etc. And so it's a fundamental reality of this universe that if your pockets are empty, you've got nothing to give to somebody else. It's also a fundamental and very uncomfortable reality that if you are on a lifeboat, there's a limit to the number of people that that lifeboat can accommodate. And although every fiber of your being is yearning to reach out a hand and pull everybody in, there's a physical constraint that that lifeboat will capsize. And so bearing in mind the nature of the times that we're in, I think we do have to prioritize this. If we can get to that state where this country, the people of this country, the stakeholders of this country, the indigenous stakeholders of this country are confident and comfortable that they have restabilized this nation, that it's on the right track again, I've got no doubt that their generosity would still manifest and they would still want to do good things for people who are in times of need. But one needs to have the ability to do that. They have been, shall we say, taken advantage of by the establishment for a long period of time. And the people in this country are so disillusioned with the establishment, with the political process, more so than I've ever seen. And it is because there is a gulf between the responsibilities that the government claims it's going to fulfill and then what it's actually been fulfilling. And the population has been neglected blatantly. And often the excuse that has been used is that it's for the benefit of people who aren't indigenous stakeholders. That, £1 million is being sent to teach LGBTQ lessons in Pakistan, for example. Those sorts of examples, they fly in the face of what is just at a time when we have young white men unable to become fully educated and confident, comfortable members of this society. And that needs to be redressed. And no amount of liberal utopian sort of preaching is going to change the harsh reality of that.
Yes, I guess there's a certain emotional, visceral intuition that everyone has that something is not quite right. It's knowing how to navigate times to achieve a better society for the majority of the country. You know, I get the logic of this framework, and especially in the context of colonial history. And many Western countries are now confronting the consequences of their past actions. How do you apply this framework? If we come back to what we talked about earlier, does it apply similarly in the Americas, in India, in the UK? I mean, how does it translate?
I've got to do more work on this, but I actually think it translates and applies very, very well. The circumstances are slightly different. We are in a land which colonized other lands and then returned here with ill-gotten gains, and sadly has used the policy of being able to, shall we say, intervene in the affairs of other nations in order to enrich itself. And then we have nations who have been on the receiving end of that policy. They have been denied indigeneity. They have been denied access to their own resources. They have been denied ownership and custodianship of their civilizational intellectual property. All of those were denied to them. You know, we saw this most recently in a very famous case where an American corporation wanted to patent neem, that herb which has been used in India for antibacterial properties for thousands of years. And it went all the way through the court system before it was blocked.
Right.
But the impetus to exploit was still there. And so what I think we're seeing now is the pendulum swinging backwards,
Right.
saying we were told that it was safe to have an open house, that anybody who came in was a wonderful person and we should share everything with them. And then they inflicted violence upon us. They took everything from us and ran off to their own home nations. That's not good enough. We've got to batten down the hatches. We've got to close those empty gates and dust ourselves down and rebuild our nation and reconnect with our own indigenous civilizational arc and resume our journey. But we have to heal first.
Right.
And so I think that the three elements model applies very well there. So we've got the colonizing nation here, and we've got the colonized nation in your example of India. In America, we have both living together, where we have the indigenous population given some degree or some semblance of rights, but given those rights by a third entity, a colonizing identity. And so the same framework is being fought out. The tensions and the fault lines are there.
Right.
Again, without a framework, they haven't worked out how best to navigate this yet. And there's a tension there. And the framework applies, but the journey is a totally different journey for them.
So stepping back a little bit, so is this paper more of a way to reframe how we think about identity and belonging? Or are you actually trying to redefine the social contract, reshape society away from universalism to something that's much more rooted in identity and contribution?
Universalism is often interpreted as the prime directive for the Star Trek ship Enterprise. That, go to all these new worlds, but the first directive is you mustn't interfere in the evolution of those civilizations. That's what universalism is badged as. We're the custodians of everybody, and we want everyone to thrive and prosper. The reality is harshly different.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so let's put the liberal perspective on, the utopian perspective on this in the place that it deserves. What I think I'm trying to do is actually to rather than create a new framework, is to help dismantle an unnatural and very violent set of ideas which have consequences and which are chickens coming home to roost in this country.
Right.
You know, there was a time when, as I say, I grew up in the East Midlands, when common sense was readily apparent on every street corner. And then we had a flood of words and ideas which really tried to override some of our more human instincts. The instinct to commune, to come together. If I think of a representation, the gathering in an English pub on a Friday night, right, was actually a beautiful demonstration of people naturally wanting to come together, tell stories, and to be part of a society. And in that process, refine their values, clarify their hopes, articulate their worries, and come together. But this deluge of words that came out of academia and people who are very, very literate drowned out, to a large degree, those basic natural instincts, hopes and desires. And I think what I'm trying to do is to possibly unpick and loosen some of the straitjacket ideas which have tried to imprison a natural way for people to live together and to develop together and to evolve their own stories and preserve their own history.
Right. So it's almost slightly walking back from this huge wave of globalization that has almost tried to make the world a homogenous place. And you're saying, no, we need to preserve indigeneity, sovereignty, and reward people for the contributions that they make, wherever they are. Yes.
And in fact, when you dig a little deeper, it's the only way you can maintain diversity. By protecting and preserving individual areas of diverse human experience and civilization and social interaction and literature, each and every one of those should be respected like one of the worlds that the Trekkies would go to and say, above all, don't interfere. Unless we protect that, then lesser ideologies come into play. And under the guise of diversity being opening your doors and letting anybody and everyone in, and let the most chaotic, the last one standing determines what the modus, what the default is, that's unnatural and that erases diversity. If you do that, the least civilized, the most barbaric, will project their value system on other more refined, less barbaric systems.
Right.
And so diversity requires these boundaries to be brought back in place. The maintenance of diversity requires difference to be honoured, not just embraced in a free-for-all. It's like if you want to make a cake, you need to pick your ingredients and protect the recipe. You can't just say, let's take all recipes, right? We'll have the pasta recipe and we'll have the Victoria sponge recipe and we'll throw all the ingredients in and we'll get a better outcome. It's a nonsense, it's a fiction. And it's an unreal fiction which has caused a great deal of harm.
Right.
And I'm hoping that we can start to pull out some of the ingredients and preserve the beauty of individual recipes.
So it sounds like you seem to be suggesting that you see this inevitable trajectory that towards conflict or domestic conflict that nations are, at least in the West, are embarked on. And unless we make a conscious intervention by having the discussion through frameworks like the one that you've just proposed, we might be able to temper that and end up with a much more constructive outcome.
I think so. And the other thing that strikes me is that, we don't live in a utopia. Ethnocide is still rampant. In India, we often talk about what they call conversion, which is a very fancy, nice colonialist word for ethnocide and cultural genocide. Right? It is an erasure of diversity.
Right.
And yet, access to those societies is acquired by trumpeting diversity. That those societies need to have ethnocidal ideologies to come in, right, so that they can prove that they're diverse.
Right.
It's a nonsense, it's a fiction. And I think it's time now for it to be, shall we say, relegated to the dustbin of history. And let's have genuine diversity, let's have genuine indigeneity, and let's see whether we can't raise the quality and standard of living and the friendship between different groups by respecting the differences in the groups and their rights to their own natural resources.
How have your personal experiences shaped the development of these views and the ideas that you've come up with in this framework? I mean, has it been a journey, or has it been some particular incidences that have sparked your curiosity or nudged you?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of all of those. Growing up in a dharmic environment, we have a value system which says that the rights of the planet are greater than the rights of human beings.
Right.
And the rights of human beings are of a higher value than ideas and ideologies. Okay? Which is why Bharat, India, was very open to the people who came there seeking sanctuary, irrespective of what their background was, because as human beings,
Right.
they ranked higher
Yeah.
on our value system. And the beautiful thing about most of the people who came in, the Jewish community, the Parsis, Zoroastrians, is they came in and they honored that understanding. And the old analogy that they merged into the society like milk
Right.
absorbs sugar. They became sugar and added to the sweetness of the society. And that's a fundamentally dharmic point of view.
Yeah.
In the absence of that, then you have conflict. And this is something that the West has yet to learn. They haven't reached the vision of a dharmic hierarchy of values.
Right.
They are still in that vision of competing rather than collaborating. They compete with nature, right?
They see it all as a zero-sum game as opposed
Absolutely.
to a virtuous circle.
And whereas we view
Right.
human beings as custodians of this creation in
Right.
which we find ourselves, they still view themselves as consumers with this environment and everything here, this creation, as being open to them to consume. And so the two differences are actually at war. The
Right.
latter one, which says consume through competition, is even at war within its own adherents. And so we have to find a way
Yeah.
of being able to separate the two ideas
Right.
and then start to have some process for healing where people are competing aggressively for resources and
Yeah.
power when really they could be collaborating for a better quality of life.
Yeah. I mean, just as an aside, does that, do you think that stems from this concept of you just have one life and then that's the end? So there's really, why do you need to protect and sustain the environment? Because you're going to be gone. So extract as much as you can and enjoy yourself while you're here, versus the dharmic view, which looks at reincarnation and believes that it's going to come back. Therefore, there's a moral imperative to make sure that you don't come back to a destroyed, deserted world.
So let's start from the point of view that both are perspectives, shall we say, with an equal lack of evidence and proof. Okay. Even having said that, the outcomes and the manner in which you conduct your journey is diametrically different from the two perspectives.
Right.
You know, if you give a child a deadline, say you've got 2 weeks in which to finish this book, pressure is created, right? A rush is created, and so on. The way in which you navigate that time period
Right.
is dramatically different.
Yeah.
Whereas if, as we have, you have multiple lives, then you have a number of things which occur. One is that you want to come back to a world which is better than the one that you entered into. Continuous improvement. But there's also an interesting option which most people don't think about, and that is you may choose to come back in a different race, in a different society, in a different background. And so again, from our point of view, you want to come back into the best version of that society. And so we have this approach which is long-term, but also very holistic. You know, we want everything to be improving, purely and solely for everybody's benefit and for the, as you've said, for the sustainability dimension of the environment that we're in. It's a good way of looking at it.
Certainly, the way you've described things, it definitely seems like this debate around identity, belonging, fairness, it does seem to be becoming much more important, particularly with increasingly scarce resources, economic downturn, wars happening. I think the framework does offer a way, at least, to have the discussion and to start thinking about how you would address the societal challenges that seem to be arising. And whether one agrees with the framework or not, it certainly forces the deeper questions and starts the conversation, which is extremely productive and very useful. So thank you for that, Panditji. Is there any final takeaway you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, just the disclaimer that this doesn't claim to provide all the answers. There's a journey that we're all on. I think from the point of view of the English in England, that phrase, an Englishman's home is his castle, springs to my mind. That was a declaration of indigeneity, of sovereign loyalty, and stakeholder status. That within this boundary, I'm going to live a full life under my own terms and harm nobody else and not let anybody else harm me. I think that's what springs to my mind when I think of that. And it's an entirely honourable analogy. And what we're seeing now, I think, is a move back to those, a rejection of the fact that actually my castle doesn't really belong to me. Anybody can come in, take a piece of whatever you wish, occupy whatever rooms you want, deprive my children, burn down my tapestries, etc., deconstruct my history and tell me that there's something wrong with me. And I think that has been firmly rejected. At a deeper level, it has now already been rejected, it's dead. The question is, how does it evolve from here and which direction do we take it? And I think as people who have a foothold in being a colonized identity, so we know what we've been fighting, we recognize colonization going on in this country. That's exactly what it is. But also, we being the Hindus of India.
Who are living in this country.
Who are living in this country, We've recognized this trajectory of colonization, of occupation, of infringement into the public space, the public discourse, the religious discourse, every aspect of society being impacted. We've seen this before. But we also have a dharmic understanding which spans at least 5,000 continuous years of civilization. And so I think the two together should give us a few more thoughts to bring to the table. And I think as being stakeholders in this country, we have an obligation to protect our investment, to protect our stake, and see whether we can roll the movement back to a time where different diverse groups can actually work out a framework within which they can experience all of their rights without diminishing anybody else's.
Yes, it sounds like the dharmic community is certainly in a unique position, given that it's seen both sides of the equation, if you like, been at the receiving end in one geography and again in another geography. So, no, a very interesting paper and definitely food for thought, and hopefully it will spark a wider discussion and a constructive discussion, because we don't want the pendulum swinging in the wrong direction, because nobody benefits from that. So, Panditji, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
No, Navita, thank you for helping me explore it. And as you can see, it's developing, and our conversation has raised in my mind a couple of questions which I'll probably need to reflect upon. But I hope that our conversation will raise in the minds of viewers more questions that they can also then answer and find solutions to. And that will be an entirely dharmic contribution to this nation's well-being. Well, thank you for the debate and the conversation.
Great. Thank you.